To Coffee Break with Rachel V. Hill, taking a daily look at the biggest stories in Denver sports and interacting live with you, the Coffee Break fam. So sit back, relax, grab a cup of joe, and enjoy your coffee break. Here's your host, Rachel V. Hill.
All right, Rachel, actually on assignment. James Merilatt, Mike Evans filling in. Mike, it takes two of us to fill Rachel's shoes, apparently. So we're going to do our best. She's on assignment today. She'll be joining us the next 3 days, though, on location. So we're not going to spill the beans, but be sure to tune in the next 3 days to see where Rachel is from parts.
I think she already kind of spilled the beans yesterday.
Oh, okay.
I think she did.
There's going to be a lot of landmarks,
Yep,
and monuments and things like that. So if you didn't already hear the news, you'll have to find out tomorrow at 10:30. But Mike, listened to you and Stink a lot this morning, so I'm looking forward to kind of jumping into what's a busy sports calendar here and cutting it up for the next half hour.
Let's do it.
All right. So first thing we got to talk about, Broncos 6-5. They're back in the mix, right? When the graphic comes up on Sunday Night Football in the hunt, they're on there. They're actually tied with the team that would be in the playoffs right now, 6-5. The Colts, they're the 7 seed. The Texans are 8, 6-5. That's who the Broncos play this week. So in your mind, is this a playoff team? Are the Broncos legit?
They are. And I have to, where's my plate of crow, man? Because I'll admit, hand up, when they were sitting there at 1-5, I was talking about tanking. And I believed it. It looked that helpless. And while I never have stopped believing that Sean Payton is the right guy, at that point, I just thought the hole was too deep to dig out of this year. So what they've done is remarkable. And I don't think it's a fluke. I think what they've done in winning these 5 in a row, there is a legitimacy to how they're doing it that I think is sustainable. First of all, you got the coach. You got a coach with a proven track record of doing things. And so the fact that this thing is turning around under Sean Payton lends to the idea that, yeah, this guy knows what he's doing. He's put some certain things in place, and you're seeing the benefits. There's no reason why that shouldn't stop. They're winning with a defense that seems to have figured things out, have turned things around. They seem to have found an offensive identity that works for them. Russell Wilson is playing much better. It doesn't feel flukish to me. I don't think they're unbeatable. I think we look at every game that's left on the schedule and say, why can't they win that game? I would also caution, why couldn't they lose that game? But there's nothing about this run that I feel is like, for example, when they beat Minnesota last week and ended Minnesota's streak, there was something flukish about what was going on with Minnesota that I felt just wasn't going to continue. I don't feel that way about the Broncos.
Yeah, and it's different than the last 2 times where they've kind of been in this spot about this time of year, right? 2018, they were 6-6 with VJ. They lost their last 4, finished 6-10. 2021, they were 7-6 with Vic. They lose out. Remember, they lose the game against Cincinnati when Drew Lock fumbles the read option. Cincinnati goes on to go to the Super Bowl. Broncos go 7-10. Vic gets the boot. They miss the playoffs. But those times, right, it's VJ and Trevor. It's Vic and Drew at that point because Teddy was hurt. It feels different when it's Sean Payton and Russell Wilson. It just does. And people can shoot holes in Russell Wilson's game all day long, and the yards aren't up there. But he's throwing 20 touchdowns, only 4 picks. He's moving around like he did up in Seattle. He's making plays when he has to make plays. He's pulling off some miracle throws, right? The touchdown to Courtland in Buffalo. Look, the Adam Troutman catch the other day for the touchdown that made that a 2-score game was a great catch, but it's also a great throw by Russ. He's playing really at a high level. Those are the 2 guys that make me believe this is legit. And the fact that Sean Payton kept everybody on track when they were 1-5, and I wrote about it yesterday at denversports.com. I get it why people weren't on the bandwagon. Like, you'd have had to have been delusional at 1-5 when you lost 70-20 to Miami. Your only win was a comeback where you were down 28-7 to the Bears, who were terrible. You'd have had to have been just absolutely delusional to believe at that point. But now that what we've seen the last 6 weeks, I'm on board. I think everybody should be on board. But the next 6 games, like, we just saw how much things can change in 6 weeks, right? 5 wins and a bye. The next 6 weeks, they could go either direction. Starts this week at Houston, then you go to the Chargers, then you go to Detroit, Patriots and Chargers at home, and at Vegas. You look at that slate. There's some winnable games. I know there's some losable games too, but how do you see this thing going?
I think they're going to be in it right to the end. And I look at these 6 games, and first of all, I guess I look at these 3 games on the road. And for the first time in a while, I guess maybe I'm exhaling a little bit, James, in that instead of just feeling like this week's game is so crucial, I've been able to sit back and look at these next 3 games kind of as a group of games. And I look at it as like you would going out on a road trip, or you go into a 3-game series. Hey, if we can take 2 out of 3, or if we can get the split on the road in the first 2 games of a playoff series, I'd be happy with that. I'm not necessarily looking at just the Houston game, just the Charger game. To me, I look at all 3 and figure, hey, if you could take 2 out of 3, that puts you in a great position to come home. You got those last 3 games, take 2 out of 3 there. I believe 4-2 and ultimately 10-7 overall. I would feel real confident as that being a playoff record. So that's how I look at these next 3 games, kind of 2 3-game series that I look at the goal as taking 2 out of 3 in each one.
Yeah, I'm with you. And it's way too early to start trying to figure out tiebreakers and all the rest of that, right? I mean, six weeks, heck, we can't figure out what the Broncos are going to do, let alone all the other teams that are involved in it. But this Houston game does feel big because they're also 6-5. So the winner of this game essentially has a 2-game lead because you're a game up in the standings and you won the head-to-head. Now, depending on how many teams are tied, tiebreakers change and who knows, but you at least want to have that in your back pocket. I think the Detroit game is probably the least important because it's NFC. That doesn't factor in at all. So if you can beat the Texans and the Chargers, that becomes just a gravy game. But I also just look ahead at the standings, right? And they're not catching the Chiefs. They're 2 games back. The Chiefs have a pretty easy schedule, so they're not going to compete for the division. So the top 4 seeds are going to be division winners. But if you look at it, 5 right now is Cleveland, who they just beat, and they're playing a rookie quarterback the rest of the year. 6 is Pittsburgh. That team, I don't know how they win games. Kudos.
They can't keep it up. They just can't.
No, they can't. And then it's the Colts and the Texans at 6-5. Like, it's not outside the realm of possibility, Mike, that the Broncos are the 5 seed playing the worst division winner on Wild Card Weekend.
I'm glad that we're talking about Houston right now because I want to get this out here because, boy, you never hesitate to remind people, DeMeco Ryans was my first choice. I love DeMeco Ryans. And as Houston has done their as Houston has done their thing this year, and especially while the Broncos were struggling, you were never shy about saying, DeMeco Ryans. So I want this out on record right now.
Okay.
Are you a Sean Payton guy? Because I don't want the Broncos to lose to Houston on Sunday and see you on social media saying, maybe they didn't get the right guy.
I would have rather had DeMeco Ryans.
All right.
I would have. I mean, he's taken a team that was the 2nd overall pick in the draft with a rookie quarterback, and all of a sudden they're in the mix, and they gave Jacksonville everything they wanted this past weekend. So I would rather have DeMeco Ryans. That's a little bit more of a long-term play, though, for me, Mike. Like, I still feel like Sean Payton is in this for maybe not as short-term as Coach Prime and Boulder, but this ain't a 10-year Mike Shanahan kind of run. And I think DeMeco Ryans could have been that. But look, I kind of got on board with Sean Payton during the offseason. I like some of the things he did. I like that they didn't do field day. It was like, okay, there's an adult in charge again, somebody who's done that. That was good. It was hard, though, during that start when he's calling a timeout on a 4th down. Like, did he just forget what he was doing? But, I think patience is a virtue, and we all wanted it to be fixed overnight. It takes a while to figure out kind of what you have. And minicamp and training camp and preseason can only tell you so much. And you see how much better this defense is when they put in guys like Jaquan McMillan and, you get Baron Browning back and you get rid of Randy Gregory and, Isang Bassey's gone. You had to figure out the right 11. And once they figured that out, they've been a lot better. So I don't know that I'm totally back on board with Sean Payton, but the last 5 games have been pretty hard to argue with.
Well, here's where I give him a lot of credit because he talked about how they've climbed out of this 1-5 hole. And he said, Well, he said, when you're in a 1-5 start, you have no choice but to go to work, keep your head down, and just kind of focus on the next practice the next day and try to get better. Okay, that sounds good. They're cliches for a reason. There's some truth to what he said. But remember, he's trying to deliver that message to a locker room that basically is made up of losers. And before you freak out there, I'm not talking about losers. I'm just talking about guys who have lost a lot here. And you're trying to sell them on a message that they probably heard from Nathaniel Hackett. They probably heard from Vic Fangio. They probably heard from Vance Joseph when those holes in previous seasons were dug. You know that they were saying the same thing, but clearly it never resonated. So the fact that he's been able to reach a room full of guys who have gotten accustomed to losing and been able to deliver a message that they have responded to like they have, man, that says something about the guy delivering the message.
No doubt, no doubt. And early on, they were still the team that found a way to lose, right? They get the Hail Mary against Washington, but can't convert the 2-point conversion. They're down a point to the Raiders with 7 minutes left. Can't get Jimmy Garoppolo off the field, right? Kareem Jackson with the silly personal foul. They let him run for 8 yards on 3rd and 7. It's like same old Broncos. He's managed to turn that around where now they're pulling rabbits out of the hat and winning games. So yeah, it's belief is a weird thing. If you believe you're going to find a way to win, you tend to. If you believe you're going to find a way to lose, you tend to. So lots of credit certainly goes to Sean Payton for installing that. All right, as we transition here, Mike, the Rolling Stones are coming to Empower Field on June 20th. The pre-sale for tickets starts Thursday, November 30th, 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. The code is Hackney, Hackney. Hackney. You can get in and buy tickets, or you can listen to 104.3 The Fan all week. We are giving away tickets across all the shows, Schlereth and Evans, Dover and Stokely, and The Drive. So if you want to go to the Rolling Stones, tune into 1043thefan.com all week or log on November 30th for the presale. All right, Mike, we kind of touched on it a little bit there with Sean Payton, but I think at this point we got to start putting together our list of people who deserve an apology. So do I owe Sean Payton one? Probably. The other guy I'm going to throw out there, and there's a bunch on my list, but I'm going to only throw out one until I start getting some of yours. I think at this point, everybody owes Russell Wilson an apology. That guy has played the way Sean Payton wants him to play, and he looks so much more like the Seattle Russ and the Russ we thought we were getting. I think the people throwing dirt on his NFL career grave were a bit premature.
Yes, but when we're talking about apologies here, I hope you're not saying that we should apologize to Russ because he decided to buy in. Should we?
No,
because
we should apologize because a lot of how things went last year, the vast majority of it, well, two reasons. One, it was Nathaniel Hackett was a disaster. And you and I have talked about this, you, me, and Stink on the air, that he came in too heavy. He tried to be a different kind of player, but he deserves credit for realizing, hey, this didn't work. We've all,
right
outside our realm at times trying to bite off more than we can chew and realize I probably ought to go back to what worked. And he was willing to do that, get rid of the office, get back to his Seattle way. Like, he deserves credit for that, and not many people have given it to him.
Okay, to a point. I'm willing to give him credit for all of that. Absolutely. To be able to acknowledge and admit his mistakes and the things that he needed to get better at. But I can't forgive him this deep into his career as a 10-year plus veteran just because all these things were given to him doesn't mean he should have taken them. Doesn't mean he should have asked for them. Doesn't mean he should have requested or demanded or even agreed to having all of his people in the building or having that private office or having an offense that put him in shotgun and had him throwing the ball 38 times per game. This wasn't some rookie or 2 or 3 year veteran. This was a guy who'd been around for a long time, and he should have known better with all of his experience that the stuff that he was asking for or was being given wasn't going to be really constructive and wasn't going to be really helpful in the big scheme of things. So I give him a lot of credit for humbling himself and going back and acknowledging that the mistakes were made. But I'll have to stop short at saying that he doesn't bear some responsibility for putting himself in that mess in the first place.
I wouldn't disagree with that. I do think, though, we've all seen, whether it's coaches or players or coworkers or whatever, people who go down a path and just stubbornly refuse to admit they're rolling down the wrong path. So I think he deserves credit for that. Will Peterson today, denversports.com, his column was Russ has earned the job in 2024. Do you agree with that?
Well, I was trending that way for sure. And we had Andrew Mason on, was Stink and I Monday. And I asked him just kind of offhandedly, said, so at this point, you know, is Russ back here next year kind of a done deal, a formality? And I'm thinking he's going to nod and say yes. Instead, he was very blunt and said, no, not at all. And because of the contract and the idea that the contract, that if you bring him back for next year, it automatically guarantees for 2025. And it's such a big contract. Has Sean Payton looked at how they've won this year with a quarterback that's, you know, throwing the ball 19 times in a game for 130 yards and saying to himself, hey, I can do this with another cheaper veteran quarterback or even a younger quarterback. So that kind of stopped me dead in my tracks a little bit, to the point where I think Russ is still going to be the guy next year. But I have to admit, after listening to Mace, I'm not as confident as I was. What about you?
Yeah, no, look, I've been the biggest. I mean, I'm the president of the Russell Wilson fan.
Yeah.
Have been, you know, since the end of last season, saying, hey, he's going to turn around. Everybody's going to have egg on their face. And, you know, when they started 1-5 and it was fire sale time and move on from Russ, my thing with that was always, fine, you can sell me on it, but you got to tell me what the plan is. Right. And the plan can't be Jarrett Stidham. So if the plan was you get the number 1 pick and you draft Caleb Williams and you're going that direction, fine. But the plan can't be another Joe Flacco, Case Keenum, Trevor Siemian. Like, we've been down that path, and you can't put yourself in quarterback purgatory voluntarily unless you have another option. And I don't know what that's going to be, but if they make the playoffs, he's coming back. They're not going to end this drought. He's the quarterback that gets them there. And they move on and go with, you know, insert journeyman here. I think that's sort of the line. If they're short of the playoffs, then it becomes debatable.
Here's the other thing, too, is that whether it's statistically or the eye test, isn't this kind of the quarterback that we were all salivating over when they made the deal in the first place? If you look at his last year in Seattle, and clearly he played well enough to a level where once he got traded here, people were really excited about it. So his last year in Seattle mattered. In that game, in that season, he averaged 28 pass attempts per game. This year, he's averaging 29 pass attempts per game. So from a statistical standpoint, pretty even. Talk to guys like Mark Schlereth, who has done a number of Russ games when he was in Seattle. Mark, eye test, does he look kind of like the quarterback you saw in Seattle? Mark unequivocally said, yes, he looks exactly like that kind of quarterback. So if this is the guy that we were so excited for when they traded for him, and he's playing statistically and with an eye test that is very reminiscent to the guy that he was in Seattle, why should we be looking to kick this guy to the curb?
I don't know. That's been my thing, you know, all along here. And I don't know if it was what they gave up. I don't know if it was the money. I don't know if it was the hype. It's probably a little bit of all of that. But I think the expectations, like, I think people thought it was going to be Peyton Manning merged with John Elway, merged with Patrick Mahomes. Like, no quarterback is perfect. Like, the prime example of this to me, Mike, is they're up 21-3 right before half against the Commanders, right? And Russ fumbles. He got face mask, but whatever. He fumbles trying to run to the left at midfield. That mistake, if Patrick Mahomes makes that mistake, the Chiefs don't lose, but that game became all about Russ's fumble. You have a 21-3 lead. That's on the defense. You shouldn't lose that game and give up. I think they give up 32 unanswered points. That's just a prime example of how expectations are so high. It literally is perfection, and anything short of that, he just draws all sorts of ire and criticism.
Well, let's face it, last year was just so bad, and it was so embarrassing. It was so cringy, and the way that the rest of the league and his fraternity members turned on this guy and just relished taking their shots at him, it really poisoned the well here for Broncos country. And like they say, you only got one chance to make a first impression, and his first impression here was bad. And so for a lot of people, they just can't, or they're still reluctant, or they still need to see a lot more evidence before they're ready to form a new impression, quite honestly. So that's the battle he faces. Some of it's unfair, some of it, a good chunk of it, he brought upon himself. But I'm willing to roll with him. And I think the other thing too is that, you know, we live here in this Broncos vacuum, right? We're just super hyper focused on everything with the Broncos. And so we pick apart his play, we pick apart the offense, all that kind of thing. But I think if you kind of extend and pull back and bring your lens and take in the entire NFL, what do you see? You see a lot of low scoring football. You see a league that for the second year in a row is putting up offensive numbers lows that we haven't seen in 13 years. We're seeing offensive numbers that you got to go back to 2005 to see as low as we're seeing this year and last year. So it's not a one-year aberration. It's kind of a two-year trend. There's a lot of mediocre offensive football out there. There's a lot of poor quarterback play. So when you look around the league, and with it being as low scoring as it is, I ask you this question to everybody out there watching: how many quarterbacks can you point to right now that are clearly the reason why their teams are winning? I don't think outside of that guy in Kansas City, and even he's having an off year for himself, that you can really find anybody.
I think Jalen Hurts, just his running ability is so different. You could put him in that conversation, but that's it.
That's it.
Right? Like, Tua's having a really nice year, but you can't convince me that Russ wouldn't be doing the same thing with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle and Raheem Mostert and Mike McDaniel calling plays and scheming things up. Like, you just can't. So I'm with you. You start going around the league, there are way more bad quarterbacks than good quarterbacks. And if the Broncos move on from Russ, I think the chance that they'll regret it, and you'll watch him playing wherever, insert team here next year, and say, man, we had that guy, and instead we're stuck with journeyman C. I think that's more likely than not, and that would be a mistake. So we'll see. Again, 6 weeks changes a lot. The last 6 weeks have changed us to the positive. We may be having a different conversation in 6 weeks, but hey, at least we're here and we got the chance to see how it's going to unfold. All right, we got to change gears here, because it's not just Broncos. The Avs were playing last night, got a 4-1 win over the Lightning. First time they've beaten the Lightning since the Stanley Cup final, and our own Richie Carni was at the game.
All right, that's going to do it. Avs take down the Lightning 4-1. It is hard to have Tampa Bay come to town and not feel those feelings of the intensity of the Stanley Cup final that they had just a couple of years ago. But this one didn't really feel that way. It was kind of a weird game. It felt like Tampa Bay outshot them early on and was staying physical, but the Avs at the same time never really struggled. They kept a 2-goal lead for most of the game, got great production from their second line. Ryan Johansson, 2 goals, Drouin and Tatar as well. Bednar really didn't have anything to complain about after the game. Thought they played well. Thought Georgiev had another fantastic night in net, which is hard to argue, which is nice to see after he had a rough patch there at the start of the season. And we'll see if they can keep going against a middling Arizona team. But all in all, pretty regular day at the office for the Colorado Avalanche.
So 15-6, Mike, you feeling good about the Avs? They had that tough stretch there. They had the hot start. Then they really scuffled, but they seem to kind of be back playing their brand of hockey. Are you feeling better about where they're at?
Yeah, I am. And specifically to what Richie talked about, that second line, I don't make it a secret. To me, that is the key storyline of this regular season, because you know what you've got with their core. You know what you have with their star players. I put them aside. I'm comfortable. I'm good. You just keep doing what you're doing. But when you look at how the Avalanche were constructed when they won their cup and what they got from that second line center, Nazem Kadri. Now, I never was against the idea of letting him go. I was fine with it. The question for me was, how are you going to replace him? They tried last year to really disastrous results, and they admitted that by sweeping out most of the guys that were the supporting cast around their core and replacing it with a new group. And so that second line, led by Ryan Johansson, for me, is the biggest question mark going into the season and throughout this regular season. So after nights like last night, when you see Johansson on pace now for 35, 36 goals, gets a couple, that second line is playing well. As Bednar talked about after the game, he said, you got 3 new guys playing together. And on a second line, that is tougher to find that chemistry because you're talking about skilled guys. He said you could put together a checking line and their job is, hey, go out and bring energy and hustle and grit and dump the puck in and go to work and be physical. But with a second line, you're asking for more skill, and that can take a little while to form. So nights like last night where that second line plays as well as they do, those are the performances that make you feel really hopeful about what this team can do in the spring.
Yeah, I'm with you, because last year against the Kraken, if it wasn't McKinnon and Mikko and Makar, nobody was doing anything. So you're right. Second line is important. Let's transition quickly to the other team at Ball Arena, the Nuggets. I'm a little worried, Mike. Now, they went in last night and got short of that win. Remember a couple years ago when they had 7 guys and they went into Utah and won somehow? Last night was a similar kind of like miracle victory, right? No Jokic, no Jamal, obviously, no Aaron Gordon. They go into LA and beat the Clippers to get to 12-6. But they've got a home game against the Rockets. You figure they win that. Then they go 5 in a row on the road. There's a chance, because they're not playing particularly good on the road, at least they didn't on this last East Coast road trip. Man, if they're flirting with 13-11, 14-10, I think they're getting down to that position where, hey, home court advantage is going to be a tough task. And I think that was vital to their run to the championship last year. I think this is a team that needs to get Jamal Murray back in a hurry and needs to start taking care of business, even though it's going to be December 1st here on Friday. I'm a little worried that they're flirting with disaster here, Mike.
Good news, bad news. Here's the good news. The good news, that win over the Clippers showed, boy, you got an incredible culture and a level of a standard of expectations that, hey, whoever's playing, here's what we expect. Go out and deliver. And boy, did that win over the Clippers show that, with Reggie Jackson and DeAndre Jordan leading the way. But now the bad news. I see so many similarities between what the Nuggets are trying to do this year and what the Avalanche tried to do last year defending their cup. They decided to give younger players a chance to do more, be given more responsibility, expanded roles, and it didn't work out well. And my I guess critique of the Avalanche was, okay, you gave these young players a chance. I got no problem with that. But once you see that it's not really working, you got to be aggressive at the trade deadline to make sure you are set up to take a legitimate run at defending your cup. They didn't do that. I am completely on board with giving all these young players as many opportunities through the first part of the season as they can handle. But same thing, if it gets to the point where they're showing that they're just not up to it, then it's incumbent upon management to go out and make the moves to make sure that this team is fortified to take a legitimate run at defending their cup. So the Avalanche, I thought, failed in that regard last year. We'll see how the Nuggets handle it this year.
Yeah, I'm with you. I've said, since the beginning of the year when we were doing war rooms and such, that, hey, they've got 82 games to figure out their 8 or 9 man playoff rotation. I think you're right. I think they have till the trade deadline.
Yep.
Because if they don't know what it is at that point, then it's a big gamble to think you're going to figure it out in the last 2 months. You got to go bring somebody in that can be the Bruce Brown and play that role. So, yeah, you're right. They probably have another, month and a half, 2 months here to figure out what that's going to be, and then they got to pull the trigger if they need another player. So, hey, Mike, this flew by.
It did.
We didn't argue as much as I think maybe I thought heading in, because I did my mea culpa on Payton. You sort of did on Russ a little bit.
I'm rooting for Russ. I want Russ to be here next year. So, yeah, we're on the same page there.
All right, good. But hey, appreciate everybody joining us on Coffee Break. Rachel will be back tomorrow. Monuments and all sorts of landmarks in the background. Be sure to tune in tomorrow at 10:30, and then today at 3:30. It's Andrew Mason, Cecil Lambie for Orange and Blue today. All right, appreciate everybody joining us. We'll see you tomorrow.